Hi, this is Noel Campbell, and welcome to this conversation I'm going to have with former Justice of the Arizona Supreme Court, Andrew Gould. Judge, thank you so much for coming. And there's so many people up here in Northern Arizona that don't know you, and this is a good opportunity for us to get together and have a conversation about that. Welcome, Justice. It's great to have you here in Northern Arizona, Prescott, Arizona, and with Prescott News.
Thank you, Noel. It's my pleasure to be here.
Good. You know, as a general proposition, you have left the Arizona Supreme Court, a very powerful position, to run for the Attorney General's position, Attorney General of the state of Arizona, probably the second most powerful position in the state of Arizona. Can you tell me and our listeners why you decided to do that?
I think the big issues that are facing this country right now are Attorney General issues. The biggest of those being election integrity and border security. Right. AGs are front and center on that. And although I loved being on the court and I enjoyed it, and I worked really all my career to get there, I go where duty calls me to serve. And I felt that with my experience, my background, I could bring that to the AG's office and address those issues better than anybody.
Right. Well, that is a big office. I think last count, there's like 425 attorneys that work for the state of Arizona. And many of the hot button issues would come before the Attorney General. So it is a important position, and it's important that the voters get a chance to hear your viewpoints on that. Let's start off a little bit about your legal education. And I heard this wonderful story about your father helping you when you were studying for the bar. Can you tell us about that?
Well, sure. You know, like a lot of people in this country, I had very humble beginnings. And my parents never really achieved any material success, were always there to encourage me. When I graduated from law school, I had an apartment with my mom and my dad and my sister, and I didn't have a desk to study for the bar. And my dad at that point was doing anything he could to pay the rent, bring food into the house. And he was about 60 then, and he took a job at McDonald's. And I remember he came home one night, grease all over his clothes, and he saw me studying on the bed, and he said, "You need a desk. I want you to have a desk." And I said, "Dad, I'm fine." And he left the room. He came back half an hour later, and he had pulled a desk out of the garbage, and he took 4 cinder blocks and put it up. And he said to me, "You're going to be a great attorney someday, Andy, but don't forget where you came from. You remember this desk." And I never have. I've never forgotten it.
That's an amazing story, Judge, really. Right. Wow. I mean, just hearing that story, it's almost emotional, really. I mean, to live through something and have your parents and especially your father do that for you. It's very moving. So tell us a little bit about where you grew up and where you went to law school and how you ended up out here in Arizona.
Well, you know, we moved quite a bit when I was young. You know, my dad struggled to make it, and so we would pick up and move. But I got a scholarship to Northwestern Law School in Chicago, and so I went there. And money was a little tight when I was there for living expenses. In fact, my mother helped me through with her Social Security checks, which is something else I won't forget. But I was looking around at different places to live, and I had a friend who had interviewed in Phoenix, and he said, "Arizona is a great place to come. It's a land of opportunity. It's young, and there's freedom down in Arizona." And so I interviewed with some law firms, and I got a job. And I actually moved my family down from where they were living to Phoenix. And I started out at a big law firm, Snow and Wilmer. That was my first job in Phoenix. That was in 1990.
So how did you end up in Yuma? I mean, we were kind of talking about that earlier.
Sure. Well, I always wanted to be a prosecutor, but because I had so much debt left over from law school, I couldn't do it because prosecution jobs, especially back then, didn't pay very well. Right. But after several years of private practice, I talked to my wife, Connie, and I said, you know, my heart is to prosecute crime, and I want to go down to the border and do it. She came from a ranching background. She said, "I'll live anywhere." And so I went down to Yuma, cut my pay in half, and I prosecuted cartels, child molesters, rape victims, every
Right.
type of case you could imagine on that border. And I did that for a number of years. Then I became the chief deputy of that office, the chief civil deputy. And then there was an opening on the Superior Court. And so in 2001, Governor Hall appointed me to that opening.
Right.
And so I was a Superior Court judge. And that was the beginning of my judicial career.
Right. Well, you and I have a little bit in common because I worked out of Yuma. We talked about that a little bit earlier, and I have many fond memories of Calexico. I was stationed in Calexico and Yuma and Nogales, worked that whole line. So this kind of leads us into what you alluded to, the border issues.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is the hot button issue up here in Yavapai County, and I think across the nation, because we're having this tidal wave of illegal immigration. And I don't mean to say that these aren't good people.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that we are not controlling the border. It's obvious that we're not. And we really have to get a handle on that. And I know that you have thoughts on that. One of the things that is really being discussed now is Title 42. And that is basically a policy that prohibits immigrants coming in who have not been COVID tested, who possibly could be carrying the coronavirus, and so are returned immediately to Mexico. But now that policy sometime in May is going to be rescinded. And I'd like your thought process on that and kind of find out where you are on that.
Well, the Biden administration really has not enforced any immigration laws and really hasn't done anything to
Right.
secure that border. But the one policy that they were enforcing was Title 42. And so we would restrain illegal immigrants coming from Mexico because they hadn't been COVID tested. There were about almost 1 million people from Mexico that were restrained under that policy. And that was the last vestige of Trump's border
Right.
policy. Well, they have now rescinded that policy. And so you have this odd situation where we don't do any screening
Right.
of people coming in from 140 different countries around
Right.
the world. But at the same time, we'll dismiss soldiers from the military who aren't vaccinated. We will
Terrible.
fire healthcare workers who aren't
Right.
vaccinated. And so it's this odd weaponizing
Right.
of the law and misuse of executive
Right.
authority to push some preferred political agenda.
Yeah, it's interesting because Hispanics, by and large, especially Hispanic men, are now voting with the Republican Party. Over 50% of Hispanic men vote Republican. So that's an idea that they have that just is not valid. Because I've always supported our Latino reach out as a Republican. They have faith, family, entrepreneurial spirit. They're natural constituencies of the Republican Party. And so we do reach out to them, but we do need to control the ability of people to come in and out of this country, or we're not a country by definition. And having worked on the border, and you know the border well, I know Mayor Nichols down in Yuma. He personally told me that they had stopped illegal immigrants from over 73 different countries, and not one of them had been COVID tested. So this is a huge issue, and I hope that the Biden administration thinks twice before they rescind this policy. There's parts of Arizona that the wall can be built. What is your thought about the wall in general? You think it's effective? Would you support the citizens of the state of Arizona trying to build a wall where it can be built?
The wall is effective. We've had walls on the border for a long time.
Right.
We've had walls in San Luis and Algodones. So President Obama built the wall, portions of the wall. So what President Trump wanted to do was extend it to
Right.
make it really something that gave us operational control
Right.
of that border. So I'm for the wall. Everybody in Yuma is for it. The sheriffs are for it. The problem is this. The money and the ability to build that wall lie with the federal government.
That's true.
So states can't build a wall on federal land.
That's correct.
And to finish that wall, it's going to be billions of dollars. That would
Right.
bankrupt the state. So we can sue the federal government to try to get them to finish it.
Right.
That lawsuit might be effective. It might not. It's worth it in terms of accountability. But we really don't have that option as a state. It's a possibility, but it's not a realistic possibility. I've heard people talk about, well, we can build walls on state land and private land, and we could. But as you know from that border, of the 371 miles, Only 171 miles of it is state and private land. The
That's
rest
right.
is reservation, federal.
Goldwater Bombing Range,
Goldwater Bombing Range, all
Organ Pipe National Monument. It's all down there. Yes,
huge swaths of it. So if you were going to build a state wall, you'd have to build a wall that went up, probably up into Pinal County. You'd have to wall in the reservation, wall in the bombing range, and then you'd have to condemn that private property. So it would be billions of dollars. I don't know how long it would be. It'd be twice as long as the border itself. So people have to look at realistic options about what we can do.
Well, that's a very interesting point, Judge. Let's move over to election integrity. And, Republicans are always accused of trying to have voter disenfranchisement. And but we as Republicans, we want to tighten these elections up so we have full faith and confidence in them. That's our position. What's your thought process on tightening up voter legislation to ensure that people who are actually voting are that person? And do you think some of these might be so onerous that they could cause disenfranchisement?
I think as an American, I want everybody who has the right to vote to vote. I don't want to disenfranchise anybody, but I want people to trust those elections.
Exactly.
I don't want any fraud. I don't want anyone to lack confidence in them. And studies have shown when people believe in elections, voter participation goes up, not down.
Exactly.
So our job is to make sure that everybody in this country who has the right to vote does vote, but at the same time, ensure that they believe that they're fair and that there's no fraud.
A couple of recommendations in the legislature right now. One of them is being proposed is that 80% of Arizonans vote by mail. And so you receive a mail-in ballot, but you return it physically and show proof of ID who you are. That's one proposal. A proposal that I recommend is that when you sign the envelope, if you put your ballot into the envelope, and when you sign it, you put your last 4 digits of your Social Security number. That is on record with the registrar of voter, and that would tighten it up. Those are easy fixes that we should implement that can be done. I mean, and so do you have any maybe insights on anything you'd like to see happen specifically?
I think those are all good ideas. I think stronger verification of mail-in ballots is a good thing. Voter ID is a good thing.
Right.
It's not an onerous burden on someone to produce ID to vote. Right. It's a privilege and a wonderful thing to be able to do it.
Right.
And I understand it's a right under the Constitution as well. But we don't strike down laws that place any restriction on voting. They can't be restrictions that disenfranchise voters. I fail to see how having a voter ID or even your ID and no disenfranchises anybody.
Right. Well, Judge, we're coming close to the end of our conversation, and I'd like to give you this opportunity to tell the voters of our county in northern Arizona anything about you that you'd like them to know and how to get a hold of your campaign if they would like to contribute or help.
Thank you, Noel. I got into this race because I love this state. I've got over 30 years experience as a lawyer. I have seen the law from every angle you can imagine. As a lawyer, I've done hundreds of jury trials. As a judge, I've handled every type of case you can imagine. And I understand what works. I understand the power of states under the 10th Amendment to enforce their laws. And I think it's about time that we got a real lawyer for Attorney General, not a politician, but someone who deeply cares about this state and knows how to get the job done. My website is gouldforag.com. I post policy statements on there every day. I'll be posting my border policy. It's a no trespassing zone policy to deal with border security. And I'll post things periodically as well. I invite you to look at the website, and I'd love to have your support for AG.
Judge, thank you very much for coming up. I really appreciate the conversation. Good luck to you, sir.